Good evening and welcome to Primetime Lawmakers, GPB's nightly coverage of the Georgia General Assembly. It's the 6th legislative day of the 2012 session. I'm Scott Slade, and coming up in tonight's program, Democrats propose placing an income cap on recipients of the Hope Scholarship. Governor Nathan Deal opposes such a cap. Legislators wrap up a week of budget briefings. State agency heads vie for their place in Governor Deal's $19.2 billion spending bill. We'll have complete coverage. We go in-depth into the budget process, in fact, with the chairman of the House and Senate Appropriations Committees, Representative Terry England, and Senator Jack Hill will join us. You can see where your money's going. And our roundtable of Capitol journalists will put all these issues into perspective. Tonight, I'll be joined by Kristina Torres of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and Walter Jones of Morris News Service. All that and more is coming up tonight. But first, we go live to the state capitol. Keosha Howard's there with more developments with the Hope Scholarship.
Good evening, Scott. The Senate Democrats outlined two initiatives today that they're pushing to this session. One makes changes to the Hope Scholarship. Senator Jason Carter says that an income cap is necessary if Hope will survive.
Just as there was when Hope began, there will be an income cap. In addition to the academic requirements that are there that ensure that it goes to the highest achieving and the best and brightest students, this cap will be set each year, and it will be set as high as possible to maximize the number of students who get the full Hope Scholarship. If the cap is set at a family income of $140,000, over 90% of Georgia families would still be eligible. And in some parts of Georgia, it would cover every single Hope Scholar.
Several changes were made to the Hope Scholarship and the Hope Grant last year in an attempt to save the struggling program. During budget hearings last week, Dana Russell, Executive Vice President of the Student Finance Commission, said that the changes made to the Hope Grant have caused enrollment to drop significantly in technical programs.
For the Hope Grant, there were two things that really probably had an impact that would result in reductions to enrollment. One was the requirement for to maintain a 3.0 GPA while in technical school. That requirement has reduced his enrollment by 4,200 students.
Senate Democrats say they plan to roll out legislation that would repeal the changes made to the Hope Grant program last year. The second initiative that the Democrats are pushing is a 3-year moratorium on hot lanes. Senator Kurt Thompson says the measure would give the state time to study the impact of those lanes.
Basically, the hot lanes moratorium bill is to do that, just simply put a moratorium for 3 years on any future hot lanes construction that's not already been approved, so that we have a chance to study the impact, both short-term and long-term, of these proposals and this method of supposedly dealing with traffic congestion. No additional lanes were actually created, so there's no additional capacity on that road, unlike successful hot lane projects that were implemented in other cities like Denver. So you've essentially taken a lane away from people that they feel they've already paid for.
During budget hearings last week, Keith Golden, interim commissioner of the Georgia Department of Transportation, said the hot lanes will not relieve traffic congestion overnight.
We didn't expect it to solve the problem the first day. It's a mindset that's got to change. I would tell you that Greta would tell you that bus ridership is up about 30% in that particular quarter. It's starting to work. It was never intended that the same people would use that lane every day, though. It's a mobility option for the day you need it.
Governor Nathan Deal says that he is opposed to the Democrats' proposed 3-year moratorium, saying, quote, he doesn't think Georgians want to wait 3 years to solve the transportation problems of Metro Atlanta. Reporting live from the Capitol, I'm Keosha Howard for Primetime Lawmakers.
Thanks, Keosha. The state Senate today granted final passage to a bill that makes it easier to issue out-of-state subpoenas. Senator Bill Calsert presented the bill.
It eliminates the need for you to go to the judge in another state and have a subpoena issued. You can go to your local judge and get the subpoena, and then just go to the clerk of court in the out-of-state district to take that deposition. This is supported by the business community and the state bar because it is a matter of convenience to lessen some of the burdensome red tape going through the litigation process.
HB 86 passed unanimously and now goes to the governor. Continuing our leadership series, today I sat down with House Minority Leader Stacey Abrams of Atlanta. Here's a sneak preview of that interview and a preview of the Democrats' legislative agenda, which will be formally unveiled tomorrow.
Georgia Democrats in the House believe that while we appreciate the direction the governor has taken, we think that there's room for a lot of common sense legislation that can really affect people's lives today. And so we're going to focus on 3 areas: economic security, educational opportunity, and shared responsibility. Economic security really is going to focus on how do we create good jobs, make a stronger economy, promote rural recovery, and most importantly, how do we help small businesses, because they are the backbone of our economy in Georgia. Under educational opportunity, we're going to really focus on common sense approaches to addressing the issues such as the loss of Hope scholarships and the Hope grants for technical college students, but also looking at things that are really affecting children in their classrooms: cyberbullying, truancy, really making certain that we're giving parents and schools and students the tools they need to be successful. Under shared responsibility, our mantra is we want to fix government so it works for everyone.
We'll have more of that exclusive interview for you in tomorrow's Primetime Lawmakers. Let's go again live to the Capitol, where Primetime Lawmaker Sandra Parrish says legislative budget writers have just returned from a week of budget hearings. As Sandra joins us there live. Good evening, Sandra. What's going on there?
Good evening, Scott. Governor Nathan Deal calls his budget conservative, emphasizing very little increases in spending. Now, he told the joint House and Senate Appropriations Committee members last week they should not be concerned about a dip in revenue after 18 months of continuous growth.
For this fiscal year of 2013, I am setting the revenue estimate at $19.2 billion.
Governor Deal told state lawmakers coming off the recession, the state has been able to maintain its AAA bond rating and grow its rainy day fund by 183% to $328 million. He says there's only a slight increase in spending this year.
My fiscal year 2013 recommendation funds enrollment in our K through 12 and higher education. It fills Medicaid holes. It funds growth, it provides additional prison beds, and includes required contributions to our state health benefit plans and our retirement systems. Outside of funding this growth, my budget recommendation calls for increased spending of 0.3%.
Coming off $1 billion in cuts over the last 4 years, University System Chancellor Hank Huckabee says the Board of Regents is learning to live within its means and is taking a hard line on tuition and fee increases by creating an affordability committee.
We are going to be very, very sensitive to any consideration of tuition increases for the next academic year. We have already notified all the campuses that any increases in fees for students, we're going to take a much harder look than perhaps we have before.
The governor's budget includes $1.1 billion for the State Department of Corrections. Of that, $6 million would go to renovate the Bostic State Prison in Milledgeville to house elderly sex offenders.
We know that in this state we have very tough laws. We have very tough laws for sex offenders for all the right reasons. Those guys and a few gals need to be where they are. But when they become old, aged, infirm, sick, have dementia in their 60s and 70s, they're very, very expensive inmates to house in the prison system. We've operated very, very well with some of our nursing home partners for the non-sex offender, the non-violent offender, people with drug and alcohol problems. Nursing homes will take those type of inmates, but they won't take the sex offenders primarily and the violent offenders. Even though the dementia may be so far advanced, the person doesn't even know where they are. So I think this is a very wise move to renovate an old correctional facility in Milledgeville. It originally was a nursing home at one point over there in Milledgeville. We converted it 25 years ago to a prison. Now we're putting it back to a nursing home.
In other news today at the state capitol, Senate Majority Leader Chip Rogers unveiled legislation that could make it tougher for local governments to create broadband service.
Private sector businesses, the private sector workers, the private sector economy is handling this exceptionally well, can continue to handle this exceptionally well. And what they don't need is for a governmental entity to come in and compete with them where these type of services already exist, and particularly compete with them sometimes when they don't have to play by the same rules. And that's really what this says, is that we're not outlawing a local government entity doing this, but if they're going to compete, they need to play by the same rules. And they need to go to the voters and ask the voters if it's okay that they spend all these dollars before they go out and spend them. And of course, we have, this state it has example after example after example where the government forays into this area have just not worked out. And unfortunately, has cost taxpayers millions and millions of dollars.
Rogers says the city of Marietta lost $24 million alone on its failed venture. He says if local governments move ahead to create broadband services, they would first be required to hold public hearings. Reporting live from the state capitol, I'm Sandra Parrish for Primetime Lawmakers.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Every year during the second week of the session, the Joint Appropriations Committee hears testimony from the governor, state agency heads, and others as they begin to work on the state budget. Eventually, the committee will present its budget proposal to the House and Senate. That week was last week. And we're joined live in studio tonight by two very important men in that budget process, the chairs of the House and Senate Appropriations Committees, Representative Terry England and Senator Jack Hill. I want to thank you both for joining us. I know you're very busy this time of the year.
Good to be here, Scott.
It is about the money, isn't it, when you get right down to it? It's the most important thing the legislature does.
It's the only thing in the Constitution that says we have to do.
Yes, how about that? Well, Senator Hill, let's start with you. Is the budget emergency over now? Do we have enough revenue coming in expected so we don't have to panic over $1 billion in missing federal funds or some other big chunk of change?
No, I don't think panic's the right word, but there certainly is a hole to put every dollar we have in. The governor has utilized some of the 2% reductions in order to meet the $900 million or so that we needed for this next year. But you know, there are no there are only really necessary programs, and they're really the nuts and bolts of government, like our state health benefit plan and our retirement system. These are things that we must do. So yes, our revenues are looking better, but we're certainly not out of the woods by any stretch.
How's it look to you, Representative England?
I agree with Senator Hill. It's to the point that we're starting to see the recovery, but there are still needs that are outpacing even that recovery. So you wind up that we're running into using up those dollars that seem to be coming in as extra or additional revenue. So it's you know, starting to get some folks coming by asking about a little here and a little there, but for another year or so, we're probably going to be in the same mode as just trying to keep up.
As far as the atmosphere is concerned, I mean, there was an awful lot of compromise last year. You guys had to work under the gun to come up with to make up huge revenue holes. What's the atmosphere right now? Would you describe it as cooperative?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Senator Hill and I have had a wonderful relationship last year, and starting off the same way this year, and it makes it a lot easier when, you know, former Speaker Coleman, as he was Appropriations Chairman, said it was a lot of times easier to do a budget in a down year than it is an up year, and so it's still tough work, but I think we've got a good atmosphere.
Senator, walk us through the budget process for those who don't quite understand what's going on. You're actually dealing with two budgets, aren't you?
That's correct. The amended 2012 budget was presented by the governor, and it will begin the process of being considered by the House, and then when they pass it, the Senate will consider it. Last year, we were able to get together on the 11 amended budget, and we were able to pass it without a conference committee. Heretofore, maybe in years gone by, we had a lot of other things in an amended budget. Not having any money is one of the solutions, but we really kind of decided that we need to just tend to those very necessary things. Let everything else in the general budget kind of compete with all the other interests. So we'll consider the 12 amended budget. At the same time, the House will be working on the governor's proposal on the 13 budget. We'll get that hopefully before too awful long. And then once we have a good look at it, we'll then get together and try to resolve the differences. But we were able to do that last year in about a week, and it was pretty painless affair last year with no overnight stays or anything.
All right, but without a conference committee too, that doesn't happen very often, does it?
In the amended, that was true. We did have a conference committee.
Okay, but in the big budget.
Right, big budget.
Yeah, as far as state departments are concerned, are any of them on notice to come up with an austere budget and a budget they think is more realistic? Have they been told, hey, give us some paper that shows 10% cuts across the board in case we have to pull that paper?
None that I'm aware of is that extreme. They've been through that exercise over the last several years. And so now, as they come back with 2% cuts, you really, I think the Speaker said it pretty well early on, that now instead of the knife or the meat cleaver, we're using a pair of surgical scissors going in and looking at certain things. So yes, there are still pockets that we need to look at a lot closer, but overall, I think agencies have done very well to manage toward what we've gotten them down to lately.
Of course, the big game is getting the money that's owed the state. Right? You say collections is a huge thing. I'd like to ask both of you, and Representative, we'll start with you. Are there any measures underway right now that might enhance the state's ability to collect what's owed them, money that's left on the table?
Well, in the last 2 years, we've given additional revenue agents to the Department of Revenue the initial results on those, it takes about 6 months for them to get their folks trained and up to speed and running, but the initial results on the first, I guess you'd call it, class of collections have been very positive, and the second class is now into their stride and starting to do enhanced revenue collections, and those have been very positive returns.
Senator Hill?
I think we've agreed that the same result has happened. We raised the revenue estimate by some $46 million last year, and my understanding is those revenue agents and fraud control agents are producing somewhere around $60 or $70 million. So there seems to be a lot of low-hanging fruit for the Revenue Department to go after. Of course, they have also a budget item this year that will produce a computer-generated system to help them catch identity theft and those sorts of things. So, you know, the Revenue Department was probably underfunded for a number of years, and we're trying to catch up both on the part that deals with the business, the part that deals with public, and with consumer services as well. We want the department to be responsive, and it's got very good leadership over there right now. So we think we're really headed in the right direction as far as revenue is concerned.
Well, that modernizing issue is kind of interesting, the anti-ID theft program. When do you think that's going to go online? Any estimates on that? Or?
I think it started this week.
Did it?
Actually.
Well, there's little news there for you, folks. Indeed it is.
I believe that the Revenue Commissioner announced it at the hearings last week.
Okay. Some specifics. Hope funding. Neither one of you, especially you, Senator Hill, was not too enthusiastic about the amount of money the lottery was generating last year. Has the picture changed on that any, and where do we go from here?
Well, you know, I don't think it's changed any. The lottery seems to be up a little bit in some cases. We're still spending more than we're taking in, and we're utilizing our reserves. I think we've still got to look at the programs, and we've still got to have some out-of-the-box solutions, I think, sooner or later. You know, Governor Deal's proposal last year was the right measure at the right time, and I think so far it's all the signposts that we're following have been pretty much as we planned, and we've got a year or two to work on it.
So you buy the actuaries on this, Representative England, that we've got a year or two to kind of work things out before we really get in big trouble?
Before the train wreck? I think you're right. And, you know, we've got a very mature lottery as far as the revenues and proceeds go. It has still outstrips any other lottery in the nation as far as history is concerned on long-term growth, and still continue to grow after the 20-year mark. We still have one of the, if not the best, college scholarship program in the United States. And it had gotten to the point, I think a lot of folks felt like that it was something that was guaranteed. But I don't think Governor Miller, when it was initiated, meant for it necessarily to be an absolute guarantee that, you know, we'll always have to live within our means. But it takes a little bit of tweaking going along to figure out exactly what the right course is. We had to make a pretty strong correction last year, and there may be some other smaller corrections coming.
One more, and I hate to ask you a quick, complicated question, but do you see any new sales tax revenue for the state, groceries or internet?
Not on groceries. On the collection of internet sales taxes, you know, state law already says that you or I or anyone who purchases something over the internet are supposed to turn around. If we did not pay sales tax on it at the time of purchase, then we're supposed to remit it. That's not being done, and so we're probably going to look at that a little bit.
Okay. Thank you very much for joining us. I know it's busy. Let's check back in with you during the process, okay? Thank you very much for joining us today. Today, the House honored football great Lindsey Scott. Scott spoke humbly to the members of the House.
It's not about me. It's about a team. It's about a university. It's about a group of people. It's about passion for college football. And I'm just glad that I was fortunate enough to be a part of that. And I'm honored to be here today. And thank you very much.
After his time with the Dogs, Scott also played 4 seasons in the NFL with the New Orleans Saints. We got to take a short break, but we'll be right back with our Primetime Lawmakers Journalist Roundtable. I'll be joined by Kristina Torres and Walter Jones, 2 longtime journalists covering state government, for in-depth analysis on the issues from under the Gold Dome that are making news today and will make news later this week. We'll be right back. Welcome. Welcome back to Primetime Lawmakers. Things are well underway at the Gold Dome. Behind the scenes, work is underway on tax reform legislation, bills that will affect the Hope Scholarship and pre-K programs, dozens of others, not to mention the budget, which we just heard about a few minutes ago. Joining me now to help analyze these important issues and more is Kristina Torres. She's a journalist with more than 16 years of experience. She joined the Atlanta Journal-Constitution in 2003. And Walter Jones, he's the Atlanta bureau chief of Morris News Service. He's been covering Georgia politics for 14 years. Thanks for joining us this evening, folks. This is going to become a regular feature of our Primetime Lawmakers.
Excellent.
And it's a great way to flesh out some of the big issues of the day. And why don't we just back into the budget? We just talked to the two committee chairmen about that. And Kristina, things going smoothly on this process? Are we really going to get it done pretty quick?
Well, everyone's fingers are crossed and that kind of thing. I think it remains to be seen. So far, it's a good thing that the governor has proposed increasing the budget by about 5%. That's a great position. They don't have to just go in and whack jobs and whack agencies and sort of do a big heavy hit. That said, there are lawmakers, the Senate Republicans and their leadership are among them, that still want to see smaller government and more changes made. They want to look at agencies harder to see if they want to eliminate some or outsource some. So I think there's still some give and take to be had.
We're going to get back to some specifics in that in just a moment about who might get left out. But Walter, are you hearing about any early turf battles in the budget process, or are things pretty streamlined?
Well, one perennial battle is whether or not the Senate should have its own budget office to begin with. The House doesn't think it does, and the Senate likes having that prerogative. They like having the opportunity to exercise a little bit of power over the budget. The way the process works, the House spends weeks on it, and then by the time the Senate gets it, they have very little time to do anything. So they want a staff to put all those changes. We'll see how that fight works out.
Compared to, what, 5 years ago, this is still austere, though, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
We're down, what, $1 billion? We're down to over $1 billion at least.
I think it's $2.
Is it $2 billion?
Yeah, it's $2 from the peak. And like 15,000 jobs. I mean, it's very noticeable, but this is the new normal. We're slowly ratcheting back up, and they think it may take another 5 years to get back to that last peak.
Well, there's one thing I wanted to add is, I mean, there's still things that need to be worked out. If you look at education in Georgia, it's more than half the budget, but there are school systems that have cut back on teaching days. I mean, you had Peach County that recently went, that last year went down to, I think, 140 school days, and they lengthened the day to make up for budget cuts.
Sure,
you
that's
have
4 day weeks, yeah.
Teachers this year that still aren't going to get cost of living increases along with state employees. You have school systems that are still down, I think, $1 billion over the last several years, starting with Sunny Purdue, for the fact that the state still doesn't fully fund its education law. So there's still issues there, but I think everyone agrees it's sort of a sigh of relief to be able to say, all right, at least we don't have to whack at it.
We hear QBE has been funded, for this year, and that seems to be a magical phrase that blows right over everyone's head. Either one of you want to tackle that and what that actually means, or whether that's really good news or not?
Well, it's good news. It's better than not funding it, but
quality-based
the big issue is that, as Kristina said, you've had all these cuts for all these years, and those haven't been put back in the budget. So the QBE that's being funded is the enrollment growth and the just annual teacher pay raises for things like seniority and getting a new higher degree. Interesting that both of these gentlemen who were here are on the special panel looking at QBE funding and supposedly going to revise it. And that committee has come out with a number of recommendations, repealing 33 existing laws and things like that. They came out with the low-hanging fruit, as they say. But the issue of what to do with really funding QBE adequately, they still haven't figured that out, and they don't have the money to do it if...
whether they figure it out or not, really.
Yeah.
Okay, now, as far as departments that are left out, who's going to hurt here under this plan?
Well, I think the big one is the Department of Labor. I don't personally know of the big explanation for this, but the Department of Labor loses almost $20 million under Deal's proposal. Their jobs would be cut in half. Now, those aren't layoffs. Those departments go to other agencies in the state, but I think there's some eyebrows that were raised in the fact that we aren't in a great economy right now, and the Department of Labor is very important to the state, and the fact that it's facing these kinds of cuts, I think, took some people for a loss.
Well, I asked the Speaker if that was meant as punishment of Mark Butler, the new Labor Commissioner, and of course they're all Republicans, and Butler came out of the House. The Speaker said no, that it was just a matter of finding the right home for those agencies.
What are you hearing about HB 87? We're hearing stirrings this week, some of the first volleys, especially from the Democratic side of the legislature, the push to repeal HB 87, if not repeal it, raise the threshold for E-Verify, the number of employees that you would have to undergo that mandate.
I think anything that happens this session would shock people. You have Governor Deal has no interest in doing it. Speaker Ralston, who's very notable in what his opinion is, doesn't want to touch it. They're all waiting to see.
Talking about the immigration law.
Yep. They're all waiting to see what maybe the federal court systems do with other examples nationwide. I don't see that happening at all.
No, the Democrats would like to do it, and there are a lot of people in agriculture and the hospitality industry that would like to see it, but I agree. I don't think the legislative leaders are going to do it.
Okay. Other issues, ethics, caps on gifts from lobbyists.
There's supposedly there may be a bill drop this week. It's been hinted at. I think behind the scenes there's been some give and take, push and pull, say what you will. There are certain groups as diverse as Common Cause Georgia and the Tea Party of Georgia that want this. Then again, you have Speaker Ralston coming forward and saying he thinks the ultimate decision is by the voters and otherwise it's not needed.
What about means testing for the Hope Scholarship?
I don't see that happening, not as long as the Republicans are in control. That is kind of a basic principle of theirs. I mean, I don't know that you'd call it a philosophy, but they've said over and over again that they oppose that it should be based on your merit.
That's the governor's stance, isn't it? Yeah. And finally, maybe something on gun laws. We're getting an awful lot of chatter about guns on campus, or maybe requiring a safety course for anyone with a gun permit in Georgia, a carry permit, conceal permit.
I think that's interesting because on the other hand, I think there's a Senate committee that's going to take up a proposal to allow silencers on your gun for hunting.
So you can get those feral hogs in your neighborhood.
You know, that may be important.
Well, and there's another gun bill that was introduced by Jason Spencer, a freshman, that would allow you to carry guns without a permit. So just basically do away with the
It's running both
permit.
ways. There'll be some social engineering. Thank you so much for both joining us. To get you back on again. And coming up tomorrow on Lawmakers, House Democrats are scheduled to continue the rollout of their legislative agenda, and we'll bring you an exclusive leadership interview with House Minority Leader Stacey Abrams. She's going to get specific about what she'd like to see happen. All that and more tomorrow on Primetime Lawmakers. If you missed any part of this broadcast, you can catch Primetime Lawmakers when it repeats at 5:30 tomorrow morning. Coming up next to GPB, it's Georgia Traveler. The team takes you to the Martin Luther King Jr. Center in Atlanta, Farm 255 in Athens, Georgia Southern University Center for Wildlife Education, and to Rome and the Rome Braves. Georgia Traveler is next here on GPB. That's our broadcast for the 6th legislative day of the 2012 session. I'm Scott Slade. Join us tomorrow night at 7 for Primetime Lawmakers. Have a great evening.
This is a GPB original production.